Farmers of oppression, the wielder of chains. Across the lands of Ardenfell, and in fact, all of Morrowind, you may have stopped and said, "There's a lack of farms, yet there's just so much food." And for that astute observation, you would need to thank the great house of Dres. You see, far to the south lies the lands of Blackmarsh, the home of the Argonians, some Khajiit, the Kothringi, and even some wayward humans. A little to the north of this, though, is this beautiful, lush land that is great for plantations. These lands are known as Shadowfen and Deshaan. Both provinces are great for plantations. As such, the great house known as Dres has made this their forte. Throughout history, it has occurred where the province of Shadowfen is lost to Argonians, but time and time again, the slavers of Dres seem to wrestle it back, or draw profit from this, as now the new population of Argonians translates into more slaves for their already existing plantations. As the world and time pushed on in the universe, House Dres adopted this specific lifestyle: plantations for the mass food production and the slave trade. This marked their way of life, so much that they even made a slave chain their house banner. Selling and exporting the slaves along with food produce has made the great house not only rich beyond measure, Outlander, but has made the other great houses reliant upon them. House Telvanni, for instance, needs the slaves for their mages, as the mages can't be bothered to run the cities themselves. And House Redoran needs food for its warriors, as they tend to live in very harsh areas of the place, like volcanic ashlands. These circulating trades within the Dunmer society has influenced House Dres to become staunch traditionalists. They view that a strong Dunmer society is far more important than a strong house. As such, when outside threats come in, like the invasion of the Empire, House Dres was more than willing to support with not only food and labor to the troops of the other houses, but even deploying their own warriors to fight off this great invasion. So when times are rough for the Dunmer as a whole, the House Dres will not waste any time in helping its neighbors. I find this faction the most interesting, as all the other great houses usually have their own belief and power scheme to install themselves superior to the other houses. Yet with House Dres, we don't really see that. We see that they believe in sticking with their traditions and staying with what was already working for them, but this time to benefit everybody else. Though this traditionalist mindset has been a negative in the past, for example, when the Great House Dres left the island continent of Morrowind, they initially refused to believe in the Tribunal. That's right, they were revoking the Tribunal Temple's idea of living gods. This was spurned from centuries-long worship of good Daedra that the Dunmer used to worship. But after time, the House of Dres relinquished these beliefs and accepted worshipping the Tribunal, but made it abundantly clear that the Tribunal also includes good Daedra, who they previously were worshipping. And much of their reasoning about any of the changes in the house always stems from this common logic of, this is for the better of Dunmer society mindset. If we're strictly worshipping Daedra, it can lead to bad things, because what if those good Daedra ask us to do terrible things? Also, by worshipping the Tribunal, they're rejoining the societal fold and saying, look, we're going to be what society dictates us. We are going to change accordingly, but not drastically. As such a mindset, the House Dres develops ties with all the other houses, and they try their best to be good traders with them. This is in stark contrast to the noble house, the Great House Hlaalu, who spends most of its time manipulating the scenes for strictly their own glory. Like House Hlaalu will handle your finances so you don't have to worry about it, but then you only find out that they embezzled most of your funds. Or a sort of more noticeable case is House Hlaalu will appeal to whoever is the authority figure, like the Empire, and get a signed contract with these foreigners so that way they can lay claim to forts that other houses already hold on to. I'm not joking. If you play Morrowind and you join House Hlaalu, that is 95% of their quests and missions, is blackmailing, stealing other people's writs and deeds to their own plantations and holds, and then just simply scribbling your name into it, so now you own those holds and deeds. This is a lot of the Hlaalu mindset. And indeed with the Hlaalus, that's pretty much what they've always done, is they accustom to foreigners. They don't really care so much about things like dark elf society and such like that. And it's not because they hate dark elves. They do it because they see power in it. They see power in joining whoever is strongest. Like, if House Redoran or House Telvanni owned all of Morrowind, I would expect to see House Hlaalu all of a sudden start sporting mages or warriors to appeal to either side. That's pretty much just the way that they live. Now, later on in the eras, specifically the time before the Skyrim video game, the land of House Dres gets flooded completely, and what land they did own became overwhelmed with Argonians as the Argonians took back what was theirs and extracted a toll on their previous enslavers. Here, not much is known of Dres, along with all the other houses, except that somehow they regained strength and still kept to the arts of plantations and inter-house diplomacy. Other than that, they seem to have abandoned slavery and slave trading. That's a huge change. Now, I'm a person who loves to speculate, and when it comes to House Dres, it wouldn't surprise me to see that the resurfacing of ancient enemies like the Aldmeri Dominion and the rise of Blackmarsh would prompt the House Dres to promote friendly diplomacy. So to start such dealings, they would of course need to stop enslaving the Argonians, as the Red Mountain nearly drove the Dark Elves to extinction. The Imperials and Nords are also not willing to help them as they seek refuge, which shows that House Dres is really their only course, and indeed, only course for the Dark Elves entirely. So their goal is to become a diplomatic people. Diplomats who welcome outsiders and praise their differences amongst the other species and cultures. Of course, time marches on, and who knows what future Elder Scrolls will bring, but maybe over time the Dark Elves under House Dres will become influential to all cultures as they establish greater relations with all species, lending their aid following the path of Dres, where they engage in humanitarianism only because they are too weak to actually be a militant threat anymore, thanks to the Red Mountain eruption. While House Dres and many of the other houses are rendered rather obsolete due to Morrowind's whole explosion with the Red Mountain, I do hope that we do see a rise of Morrowind, where the great houses starting a battle between Hlaalu and Dres. Dres and Hlaalu being complete opposites in their mindsets and goals, I would find that very appropriate to see a game where outsiders are being dragged into a conflict where they think it's an easy turn-cut deal that Dres are just slavers breaking the law and are continuing the slave trade. But as they fight, they realize that the workers at the plantations are just workers. They're not slaves. It shows how diplomacy could be conducted by the House Dres, and how they would begin preaching to outsiders that they seek to enrich everybody's lives by showcasing to them Dunmer culture. Show House Dres gaining outsider help from people who are thankful for the humanitarian aid they have received. For example, there could be a time where all of a sudden Skyrim's people are starving because they just got over their civil war. Well, House Dres, with whatever food that they have, they'll, instead of stocking it, they'll instead bring the salt rice to Skyrim and say, here you go, we're not even charging you, just take it. And this would lead to a war where it's outsider versus outsiders, the mercenaries versus the saviors. It perfectly encapsulates what makes Hlaalu and Dres so different, as on paper they seem completely the same, two rich noble houses who engage in commerce and trade to gain power. But from there it stems off completely in two different directions. House Hlaalu does underhand tactics with their money and their commerce, so that way they gain personal strength, personal growth. House Dres, on the other hand, gives away their growth and their power, so that way all of Dunmer society can flourish. Aside from that, this has been Freezer 700. I am out. Tell me below what you love about Morrowind. Personally, I love the Great Houses, as they have some interesting skill sets that make them stand out from the typical warrior, mage, thief gameplay that we always see. Besides that, see you lads next time. This is Freezer 700, I'm out.